Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Red Bank Humanists July Forum. I'm Eric Selder, president of Red Bank Humanists. Thank you all for coming today. When we think of the breadth of humanist issues, there are many causes that we care about. But there's a subset of these that are of special concern and are especially humanist, because our humanist perspective recognizes where religious tradition has missed the true human interest and insisted on attitudes, customs, or even laws that thwart the reasonable interests of the individual human being. Ethan Anderson is here to talk to us about the legal status of assisted dying in New Jersey and around the country. Ethan is a recent graduate of Rutgers University and is a field organizer for Compassion and Choices, an advocacy organization for end-of-life choice. Please join me in a warm welcome for Ethan Anderson.
So, I guess a good place to start is I love humanists. That's just candor. Why not? It's true though. It's true. You guys are wonderful. There's just, and I was talking about this earlier, there's just this wonderful mix of compassion and rationality that is so rare outside of humanism. So it's just wonderful to be a part of that. So thank you for having me. A little bit of background about myself. I was 4 the first time I expressed a fear of dying to my mother. I noted to my mom that I was afraid to die. Same, yeah, of course, a lot of that here. I know that I was afraid to die because I didn't know what was going to happen, and I think that fear comes out of a lack of knowledge. Fear of the unknown is essentially, well, that's just what fear is. It's not known what's going to happen next. And but I don't remember that. Really, the first time I remember having an absolute fear of death was when I was 6 years old. And I was crying over a bowl of spaghetti, once again to my mother, there's a trend here, that I didn't want to die. And I didn't lose anyone in the family. No one passed away. I was just scared. Because I didn't believe in God. I can't say that I ever really have had a particularly strong faith. I described to Trudy earlier, I'm a hopeful agnostic. But it's hard to know what's going to happen next. It's not really knowable. And I think that's where that fear originated from. So as a result, I decided to start working as a field organizer my junior year at Rutgers, despite being a finance major, so this has nothing to do with that. I don't even do finance anymore. Because this is vitally important. You know, at the end of the day, I found that if the first 90% of the day for me is of high quality, if I'm having a good time, if I'm enjoying myself, and if the day ends badly, I don't look back on that day with fond memories. You know, generally, the whole day is seen in a different light. And so that's why I find that it's so important that we end well, because the end of the day matters. So I'm here to talk to you not only just about a specific piece of legislation here in New Jersey, but also about how that ties in with humanism and how we die. Because it really does, it matters for everyone. And I'd also like to mention that if by some chance you disagree with everything I say about aid and dying, I recommend you still get advance directive. That's still something you should do. So please definitely look into that. And if you go on the Compassion Choices website, we have lots of information on advanced directives, and we have a free end-of-life consultation program. Our goal is better end-of-life choices and care as a whole. It's not just advancing one particular option over another. Because really, that's your choice. We each have our own distinct background, belief structure, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to say, well, this is what I want, so therefore this is what you should want. I've never really understood that line of logic. It's not even really logic, it's not blessing. So just to give you a little background for a piece of legislation, this is called the Aid and Dying for the Terminally Ill Act, or Senate Bill S382, and it would allow a terminally ill, mentally competent adult a choice to self-administer medication that would end their lives in a peaceful and dignified way. So this is the legislation that was introduced by Assemblyman John Bersicelli in New Jersey's 3rd Legislative District. He lost multiple family members to ALS and decided that he didn't want people to have to go through that if they didn't want to. And so he introduced this bill. So there are 5 safeguards to receive this medication under the bill. By the way, as you can tell, this is I've focused a lot on the legislation itself, so it'll get a little dry at times, and I hope that you just bear with me. So first off, you have to be 18 or older to take the medication. So you have to reach the age of consent. And this is the way it is for if you want to, I suppose if you want to buy a gun or if you want to vote. Reaching the age of 18 is a pretty standard limit for people to make certain decisions. So that's what we got that. You have to be terminally ill less than 6 months to live, as diagnosed by 2 or more doctors. So that means not only do you have to have a terminal diagnosis, but you have to be within the last 6 months of life. And, like I mentioned, diagnosed by 2 or more doctors, one of which must be your attending physician. So you can't shop around for doctors that'll give you a terminal diagnosis. It really just has to come down to whether your attending physician deems you to be terminally ill. Terminally ill, 18 or older, you also have to be mentally competent. So the definition of mental competency is not one that's universally agreed upon, but in this case, if your attending physician suspects there are any mental competency problems, you would then have to undergo a mental evaluation with a psychologist or psychologist or, I can't think of the word right now. What's not a psychologist but they can prescribe something? Psychiatrist, that's terrible. So you have to undergo a mental competency evaluation. If you fail that, you wouldn't qualify for the medication. And that doesn't mean that people that are not mentally competent don't deserve to take this medication or they shouldn't be able to. This is really just to make sure that the only people that take this are those that are fully aware of what they're doing and that they're ready for it. You also would have to be a resident of the state in which aid and dying is legal. Residency requirements vary from state to state, so I can't objectively say this is how long you have to be in the state before you're a resident. But it's a bit of a process, and chances are if you're already terminally ill, you're not going to have time to then move to another state and become a resident and then go through the whole process. Most people are not able to do that. And lastly, you also have to be able to self-administer the medication. So this is a very important one because it really ensures that no one else is giving it to you, no one is putting something in your body. This is really underscoring the fact that this is a personal choice. It's something that you're choosing to do for yourself if you decide that that is the best thing for you. That's what it boils down to. So there are a lot of requirements. There are also a number of safeguards in the bill. I think the strongest would probably be the fact that if you try to convince someone to take this medication, if, for example, you are in their will and you're hoping to have them die sooner so that you have more money, something like that, you would be charged with a second-degree felony. It's the same type of felony for if you try to convince someone to change their will. In this case, it would be to convince someone to take the medication. And you'd be charged with a second-degree felony, and you would go to jail or prison, probably prison because it'd be more than a year. And I think probably the strongest safeguard in a bill is one that says if you tamper with this, we're going to put you in prison. It's a pretty strong incentive not to tamper with it. So you have to, so there's that safeguard. There's also the fact that you have to make 2 or more requests for medication, at least 15 days apart. So this way you can't just ask for medication and say, I want this now, and then immediately get it. There is a second request that must be made more than 2 weeks from the first. Your first request must be written, and there must be 2 witnesses to that request, one of which cannot be a family member or someone that is listed in your will. The other one could be. But in any case, this is just, and again, establishing a further safeguard to make sure that you indeed do want this medication. So as you can see, that this bill is not designed to make it incredibly easy and convenient for people to take a certain type of medication. That's not really the goal here. And there are a lot of hoops to jump through. And in my opinion, that's sort of how it should be. It shouldn't be an easy decision.
A little slower.
Yes, thank you. I've actually done that, so I appreciate that. So you have to make 2 more requests for medication, and a lot of the things in this bill are designed so that you really think this through. One of them would be, for example, that your doctor has to discuss all possible options with you. So if you ask for the aid and dying medication, your doctor can't just say, okay, well then here you go. They have to say, well, we can go through hospice, we can have this type of treatment, we haven't explored this yet, we could simply take you off all current medications. So your doctor has to illuminate the different options for you. And I think that's also vitally important. Personally, I think you should be having these conversations with your doctor before someone reaches a place of terminal diagnosis. I think it's something that you should be doing fairly often, just talking to your doctor about your preferences, about what you want, what you're looking for. And if you have a doctor who doesn't particularly want to talk about these things, you might want to get a new doctor. That's just my advice. So you would also need to have a really, the best I can put it is that this centers around patient-centered care. This ultimately boils down to focusing on what is best for the patient, what they want, what they think is best for themselves. And I think that if someone is terminally ill and mentally competent and 18 or older, and they're able to do this themselves, I personally don't see a reason why someone shouldn't be able to. And now, that being said, I'm trying to be as objective as I can reasonably be about this topic, but obviously I'm an advocate for this option, so there's a limit to how objective I can be. But I will go over, in about 10 minutes, the reasons why someone might oppose this legislation. And we will have questions at the end, so don't worry about that. So in terms of the aid and dying movement itself, so New Jersey is by no means the first state to introduce a piece of legislation like this. The first state that legalized aid and dying was Oregon in 1997. So it's been legal in Oregon for about 18 years. And to be honest, if I was living in Oregon in the mid-1990s and someone told me about this type of bill, this type of movement, I'd be concerned about it because I'd have too many questions. I would think, well, what about hospice care? Well, what's going to happen down the road? What about abuse or neglect? And I'm not really sure whether I would support it. But we're in a special situation here because we live in a country for which more than one of our states have had aid and dying as a legal option for multiple years. One of which have had aid and dying legal for 18 years, namely Oregon. The 5 states in which aid and dying is legal in the U.S. are Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Montana, and New Mexico. So as you can see, it's a bit of a diversity of states. Oregon and Washington passed their laws through ballot measures, Vermont through legislative action, and Montana and New Mexico through court decision. Here in New Jersey, we're going through the legislative measure, but I'll get to that soon enough. So really, ultimately, I think the strongest argument in support of this type of bill would be the empirical evidence that we have from Oregon that this has gone very well. So last year, 155 people received this medication, and 94 self-administered it to end their own lives. So that's 94 out of 155. 94 out of 155 in Oregon last year. So that tells us a couple of things. First off, that not many people are taking this medication. Second of all, that of the people that do receive the medication, not all of them take it. In fact, about 2/3 of the people that receive it take it, and about 1/3 don't. And that's been about the ratio since aid and dying was introduced in Oregon in the mid to late 90s. So that tells us that this is something that people look to as an option, as a choice, because really our strongest human instincts are to reproduce and to survive. And this goes against one of those. This is not something that people actively look towards. You know, there was a political cartoon that I saw a little while back, and it was drawn up by a member of an opposition group to aid and dying. And it showed a bus full of seniors driving to Oregon with the intent of ending their own lives. So it had this idea that there's going to be some crazy movement for people to take this option. And really, our natural inclination is not to do that. This is for people that would prefer to live but no longer have the option to do so. And that's why so few people end up taking it in Oregon. In fact, the actual percentage is 0.031% of all deaths. So if you think about it, that's around 1 in 500. Not very many people are taking it. But ultimately, in Oregon, I think the statistic that provides me with the most comfort is the fact that the average amount of time between someone receiving medication and taking it is 45 days. So on average, if you decided to at one point take the medication, you waited a month and a half before doing so. And that really reinforces the idea that this is not something that people receive and then immediately take because they want it. It's something that they use as a last resort. And frankly, hospice and palliative care, well, hospice is a form of palliative care, is extremely powerful. And New Jersey has excellent hospice and palliative care. In fact, Oregon is on the leading edge for palliative care. But in the state of Oregon, where people have taken this medication, roughly 95% of people that took this medication were already on hospice. So when people tell me that there should just be better palliative care, my best response to that would be, well, 19 out of 20 people that took this medication were already on hospice and still deemed it necessary to take such a medication. And for most people that won't really apply. Most people won't have need for this, it'll be enough, and that's fine. And this is for that 1 in 100 patient for which they have a loss of dignity, autonomy, or an abundance of pain that is not manageable. And it's for those patients that I talked to you today about this option. However, personally, the things I like about this issue is that it opens up discussion towards other end-of-life choices that are also perfectly valid. And there's no real way, in my opinion, to quantify these things. You can't say this one is better than that one. It's really whatever you want. In the state of Oregon, 97% of people that have taken this medication passed away at home. For me, I just think that's sort of nice because most people want to pass away at home and most don't. So I think that's just worth noting. What's important about this is that, and people have said to me, well, why, it's not illegal to end your own life now. Why don't people just do it on their own? And what's important about this process is that it is legal, it is regulated, and people can do it with the acceptance and or approval of their family members. I've heard of many cases of people ending their own lives and having to do so in such a way that no one else found out, or no one was around when they did it. And if you'll watch the film How to Die in Oregon, which is a great documentary about the state of Oregon and people that have taken medication there, It shows that people are able to end their own lives in a peaceful and dignified way with their families surrounding them. And I think that's very important. So in terms of the movement as a whole, there are over 20 states with pending legislative action in the U.S. So it's gained a lot of momentum. People are starting to realize that this is something that some people really need. Not everyone necessarily, but some really do. And I've encountered a lot of people that have said, well, I personally am opposed to this option, and yet I also acknowledge other people should have the choice to decide for themselves. Which is why this really boils down to personal autonomy. In terms of the New Jersey bill itself, so like I mentioned, Assemblyman John Bersacelli introduced this bill, given his family, the numerous people that passed away in his family from diseases like ALS. It passed through the Assembly on June 5th of 2014. Well, it passed through the Assembly Health Committee at that time in a vote of 7-2. And it passed through the full Assembly on November 13th of 2014 in a vote of 41-31. So there are a couple of components to that. So first off, does anyone know how many people are in the New Jersey Assembly? 80, that's exactly right. So you need 41 votes to get a bill through the Assembly. So it was the exact number that we needed. But it's 41-31 sounds better. A lot of people actually didn't vote on that day. So we got the exact number of votes that we needed. 4 Republicans voted in support of this bill. So for those that say this is a partisan issue, they're just wrong, because we have a lot of Republicans that have come out and said, look, I support this because either I've lost a family member in an unnecessarily painful way, or they'll note, look, I personally oppose this, but again, other people should be able to make this choice for themselves. There was actually a libertarian in the New Jersey Assembly who noted to us confidentially that he thought this bill was too rigid and there should be less safeguards and people should just... I personally disagree with that. But there are people in all parties that have come out in support of this. The New Jersey Green Party sent out an action alert to its members asking people to support the bill. Democrats support it. I mean, really, this is not a political issue. This is a human issue. And I'm a humanist group. That wasn't planned, but that worked really well. So we have a lot of Democrats and Republicans supporting it. It passed through the Senate Health Committee on December 15th of 2014. That passed 5-3-1, so one person abstained from the vote. Senate President Stephen Sweeney is a sponsor for the bill. He's in the 3rd Legislative District, and it makes it a lot easier to pass a bill when the Senate President is a sponsor for it. However, we expect to have another vote on this bill likely in November or December of this year. That would be in the lame duck session. So there are a couple of different reasons for that, but ultimately we're trying to get those last couple of votes together. We have some senators in South Jersey that are a bit on the fence for this bill, one of whom is Senator Jim Beach, who's the senator for this district. So that's why it's a wonderful group to talk to, because we are in that district, and at the end I'll talk to you about different things you can do to volunteer. But the legislative process is one that is essentially, I think that the most powerful reason you can convince a legislator to support this is ultimately that the majority of New Jerseyans support this issue. In every poll that I've seen, more than 50% of New Jerseyans support the availability of the aid and dying option. Support nationwide is about 70%. This is an issue that people are really just warming up to because we're dispelling this fear of talking about death. The fear of death is still there. That's instinctual. That's what allows you to look both ways before you cross the road. Some fear of death is needed, but that fear of even just talking about it is slowly going away. And I think anytime we have a discussion like this, it goes away a little bit more. But I mean, in my personal, just through my own life, not even like citing any books, I can say that the best thing you can do to nurture fear is to ignore it and to shy away from it and say, no, I don't want to face this. This is too scary. I mean, personally, I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but it's sort of like, you can look at like the finger puppet, or you can look at the projection on the wall, which isn't real, but it seems a lot scarier. And so it's up to us, I think, to focus on the finger puppet itself and focus on what's actually there. That's more a philosophical discussion that we need to have, but that's how I feel. So Governor Christie is opposed to this bill. I don't think any of us are all that surprised by that. Governor Christie has taken a stronger pro-life stance as of late for his presidential run. He has actually stated that he's opposed to this bill, and it's very unlikely he would change his mind, especially now. We don't have enough votes to override a veto from him. We would need 54 in the Assembly and 27 in the Senate, neither of which are likely. So ultimately, our goal is to make sure that we continue to have momentum, build up our supporter base, and continue talking about this issue. in the hopes that once Governor Christie leaves office, which could be tomorrow, who knows, he might, I'm not saying that's a good thing, again, this is not a political issue, but he could leave office for a presidential run. There are also 2 senators in New Jersey that are introducing a bill that would force New Jersey governors to leave office if they decide to run for president, because, you know, that way they'll actually, because if you're running for president, you can't be in the state and be focusing on what's going on here. That's not even a Democrat-Republican thing, it's just true. The 2 assembly members for this district, Pam Lampitt and Lou Greenwald, both voted in support of this issue. So for any of you that live in the 6th legislative district, Cherry Hill, Voorhees, all that, feel free to thank them, because that, you know, we needed those all 41 votes. So they both, you know, we needed both their support. So that was great. In terms of the reasons why you might oppose this issue, and I will of course go through all these later and explain why I disagree with all of them, but to start off, I'll just explain these personal stances. Slippery slope argument. Some people say, you know, oh, well, if we legalize aid and dying, then people that are not terminally ill will take it, and then I've had people hypothesize that it could lead to involuntary children's euthanasia. People have speculated that. Emphasis on speculating. So the slippery slope argument is there. There's also the religious/ethical/moral objection, in which people say, my religion dictates that this is not okay, therefore we can't pass this bill, or this is wrong. People say suicide is wrong, and therefore you can't do it. The abuse and neglect argument, which essentially goes along the lines of, if we pass this, people will be abused or neglected. This opens, and elder abuse is a problem in this country, and this would open up that door more. People have claimed, they've said the Hippocratic Oath, in which they'll claim, you know, the Hippocratic Oath, which states, first do no harm, which is sort of an oath for a doctor. They'll say that this would be causing harm to a patient. The concern for alternative treatment, in which people can say, well, what about hospice, what about palliative care? Certainly there should be more things we can do other than this option. And then lastly, the possibility of outliving a prognosis. So by no means does every person that is given a terminal diagnosis pass away from that disease at the time that the doctor stated that they would. That's just a fact. And so all of these different factors together can make, one might argue, a compelling argument. Now, my personal stances on all of those, which I'll go through now, I'll go through quickly. Slippery slope. First of all, it's a bit of a logical fallacy. So it's sort of like saying if we allow gay people to marry, they'll marry their chandeliers. Essentially, it's just saying if we do this, then that will happen, and there's no reason for that. It's true. That's along those lines. But ignoring the logical fallacy part, aid and dying has been legal in Oregon for 18 years now. Their bill has not changed. Their bill is essentially the same as it was when it was first passed in 1997. So we're in a rare circumstance because we have over 30 state years, that would be if you combine all the states for which aid and dying has been legal, you add up all the years, we have 30 state years in which there hasn't been a single case of abuse or neglect. So that addresses that point. And the laws haven't changed. It's just very straightforward to me. In terms of the religious/ethical/moral objection, my personal stance is this. Your personal beliefs are just that. They're yours. And if you personally are opposed to the practice of aid and dying, then you probably shouldn't exercise it for yourself. But I do feel that that shouldn't stop other people from having access to that option. I feel that it's important to have a belief structure, but it shouldn't get in the way of other people having their own. I think the separation of church and state should apply here, and I don't think you can make legislation, you can't prevent legislation that allows people to exercise their own personal beliefs for what is best for them. That's my personal stance anyway. I'm sure most of you would agree to that to some extent. Right? I saw the library, it's all about separation of church and state. In terms of, it's true, the Hippocratic Oath. So the Hippocratic Oath goes, first do no harm. I think first do no harm is different for every patient. I think for some patients that harm would be saying, no, you have to do this the way your body decides, not you, the person, decides. That's my personal stance. And in terms of alternative treatment, look, you can have higher quality care and more options at the same time. These two things are not mutually exclusive. We've actually found that in Oregon, we have high quality care and we have a large number of options. The two actually often come hand in hand. Because when we start paying more attention to end-of-life care, the quality of it naturally increases. We naturally start focusing more on what we do to make sure people have high quality of life. because really, I do care about the sanctity of life. I think it is precious. And I think the quality of it matters also in my personal experience. And in terms of the possibility of outliving a prognosis, the idea here is that only a mentally competent adult could take this medication. Only someone that is aware of the technical possibility that they could outlive their prognosis. And I believe that is their decision to make. Whether they think it's worth the risk or not, I think it ultimately boils down again to personal autonomy. And in terms of the reasons why we should support this, well, really, even if I was opposed to this, I would like to think that even if I thought that I was never going to take it, I would like to think that I would still allow other people to have this choice. Because really, ultimately, this is not whether you personally want to end your own life if you are given a terminal diagnosis, because I think we can't really know that ahead of time. You know, my thoughts on death, on dying, are going to change as I progress through life. That's that. That's how it works. But I do feel that I shouldn't be getting in the way of someone else's end-of-life choices, because it's a personal option for them. And whatever they think is best for themselves, so long as they are terminally ill, mentally competent, 18 or older, they can take it themselves, and they're a resident of the state. It's not really a moral stance, but in any case. If they pass that criteria, I see no reason why I should get in the way of them doing what they feel is best for themselves. But ultimately, this comes down to education. You know, we are probably not going to have a law like this active in New Jersey for probably, I'd say, 1 to 2 years. A lot of legwork goes into it. You know, I've heard, for example, about women's right to vote. That didn't just happen because men decided to give it up or because that's just how the movement went. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of organizing. And it was a real fight. And that's been the case for really every issue. You have to fight to get it. Things don't just happen. Time is sort of arbitrary in that sense. So we do have to put in the work to get there. And until then, I think what's wonderful about this issue is that simply merely by talking about it, we can start to think about what we actually want at the end of life. And there are things you can do until then. I'd recommend you do go on the Compassionate Choices website. You look into the various advanced directives you can get. Educate yourself on HOLST orders. That would be physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. I'm not an end-of-life consultant, but we do have a free end-of-life consultation services. All our services are free. Really the goal is to empower people to make the best decisions for themselves, whatever that may be. That's the overall goal. But I work in advocacy, so that's why I'm focusing on one specific issue a lot. And that's the bulk of it. It really comes down to allowing people to make decisions for themselves, whatever that may be. And in terms of what I all want from you today, other than just having a discussion about this, and I will open it up to questions, and I would love to hear what you all have to say on this topic. And if you disagree with it, please do speak up, because I think it's important to get that out. I would love for you all to volunteer if you're able to. We have people that can, you can make a couple of phone calls, write letters to senators. We have petitions on that back table, and I would love for you all to sign a petition if you support one. You just sign it and then put it at the bottom of the stack, and it'll collect at the end. If you want to volunteer, you just put a little star on your form, and then that way I'll reach out to them and say, hey, what do you want to do? You can also host a house party. If you know any other groups like this wonderful conglomerate of people here, let me know, and I'm happy to give a presentation on the topic there. I've given presentations in strange areas. I actually tabled at a bridal expo once, and they did not want me there, as I soon found out. I got about 10 petitions after being there for about 4 hours. Because apparently when people are doing bridal shopping, they won't be thinking about their inevitable demise. So I will talk anywhere. So there's that. Don't send me to any bridal expos, please, actually. So we can do that. Let's see. Like I said, you can host a house party. We have occasional lobbying days in Trenton. I could also organize a bus to go from, say, for example, from here to Senator Beach's office. You can all visit him. That'd be fun. They'd welcome that. So I guess that's about it. So I'd like to welcome you all to ask questions, and thank you for having me.
I'd like to know what's done with the medication that's not used.
Right. That would probably fall under the Prescription Drug Act. Right now, there isn't a lot of oversight in most medications that people have. So if I'm given, for example, oh, that's a good idea.
What was the question?
Go ahead. The question was, what will be done with medication that is given out to people in a state where it's legal? And chances are it would fall under the Prescription Drug Act, so that there would be a regulatory body within New Jersey that would oversee it. It's not specifically mentioned in the legislation. It doesn't say this is exactly what we would do with it. It hasn't been the case in other states, and we haven't found any problems with people taking the medication for which it wasn't prescribed to them. And it's also worth noting that this medication is not some magical elixir. I mean, you could probably find things in your household that you can take to end your own life. The point of this is that it's painless, that it's peaceful, and it's regulated. That's really the key component here.
Okay, just to remind everyone, I'll walk the mic around, raise your hand, I'll make a note of who would like to ask questions, one at a time. We'll ask questions for the next half hour maybe.
Great.
All right, I'll come back to you in 1 second. I'll get you in 1 second. Ryan was right ahead of you.
Good morning, thank you. Two things I was going to ask is there a variety of medications from state to state, or is there just one set of medication? And the other thing was, there's got to be some gray areas with self-administering with regard to ALS patients or quadriplegics or some. I'm sure that there's gray areas, and how has that been handled?
Right. So it's a good question. In terms of, your first question was in regards to different medications. The top two most commonly taken medications in the U.S. for this law are secobarbital and pentobarbital. They're both barbiturates, but it would vary from state to state based on what is available. Chances are, in a lot of states, it's been a cocktail of drugs, like one that would put you to sleep, one that would relieve pain, one that would prevent vomiting. So it's hard. It doesn't say in the New Jersey legislation what specific medication would be taken, but usually it's a barbiturate of some kind. In terms of the gray area of someone self-administering the medication, it's fairly straightforward. If you're not physically able to self-administer the medication, then you can't take it. And if you happen to be physically able to self-administer the medication when you receive it, but not when you decide to then take it, you don't qualify for it. So really, I mean, the point of this is not to say that some people shouldn't be able to take this by any means. This is to make sure that the only people that take this are people that are mentally aware of what they're doing and are physically capable of doing it themselves. It's to prevent the possibility of abuse or neglect. And frankly, that's why Oregon hasn't had any cases of abuse or neglect. It's because of those strong safeguards. So that's how it would apply.
Could you please compare laws in Oregon and this potential law in New Jersey with those of other countries? And what about people, say, with Alzheimer's who are not mentally competent?
Right. So in terms of comparing New Jersey's legislation to Oregon's legislation, New Jersey's was modeled after Oregon's, and unfortunately you can't just copy and paste a law from one state to the next, but it's very similar. It's the same safeguards, still 6 months or less, 18 or older, must be mentally competent, so it's essentially the same type of legislation. Comparison to other countries, from what I understand, in countries like, for example, the Netherlands or Sweden, where people are able to end their own lives, there's a vast difference in terms of what criteria you must meet. In some countries, from what I understand, you wouldn't have to be terminally ill, or you wouldn't have to be a resident of the country. And members of opposition groups have stated this and said, well, look what's happening over there. And my usual response to that would be, well, there are states in this country with legislation that this is modeled after that have very clear records on what's gone on, but if you want to compare it to a different continent, I guess you could. But it's more applicable to focus on what's actually happening here in our legal system, in our political climate, in our culture, and with similar legislation. So,
And the second part was about people with the ALS.
oh, ALS with Alzheimer's, that's right. So again, this part is all that's unfortunate. The only people that are able to take this medication are those that are mentally competent. So chances are, if someone has end-stage Alzheimer's, they wouldn't be able to take the medication. Also, you have to have a terminal diagnosis of less than 6 months, and that there'd be an issue there as well. Because there's a difference between saying, we know this disease will at some point take your life, and saying, this disease will take your life for the next 6 months. And it's very difficult to estimate that with Alzheimer's. I have noted that the second most common disease of people that have taken this medication in states where it's legal was ALS. So people with ALS are still taking this medication. It's just not that all would necessarily fall to meet that criteria. So.
Okay, in 19 1983 and 1989, I spent the whole month each time in the intensive care unit with a diagnosis of terminal death. So not even less than, on a daily basis. Despite this fact, I had requested no religious people, and they ignored me. And they come anyway, and I had to send them away. I mean, they're very annoying. Is there any provision in this bill, which I happen to not agree with because of my experience, is there any provision to stop someone that's gung-ho about this bill from approaching me and trying to convince me that I need this death with dignity? Is there any safeguards to keep people from approaching me? Or
well, what do you mean by approaching?
Well, if somebody wants to give me a choice, out of maybe you're well-intended, maybe you think I need this.
Right.
I want to die with dignity. If I don't choose it, then I guess I'm not dignified. So I don't like that name, dignity. Just call it what it is. Assisted living, if you want it. If you want it, I agree you should have it. I particularly don't agree with it myself. Okay, what is to protect me from somebody like that wants to give me this information that I really don't want, while I'm very vulnerable? That's what I'm asking.
Right. So
is there a provision?
No, I mean there's nothing in the bill.
So as a counselor, you can come and give me this information. You can come into my hospital room and give me this information, whether I want it or not?
Well, first of all, I'm not a counselor, so I wouldn't be coming into your hospital room, first of all. Second of all, in terms of states where this is legal, there's no system set up for which we have representatives going to visit people that are terminally ill and saying, hey, why don't you take this? This is publicly available information. There's no system set up so that people that are terminally ill that don't want it have this information forced upon them. And in terms of what you mentioned about how this is not, death with dignity, how you can find a dignified death somewhere else, completely agree. My personal stance is that you shouldn't necessarily have to take a medication that ends your own life to have a dignified death. And for some people, their dignified death is one in which they fight aggressively to survive as long as they can. For some people, a dignified death is one for which they cease treatment and just let nature run its course. And for some people, it might be self-administering life-ending medication. That is up to the individual, in my opinion, to decide. So.
Thank you so much for your really interesting talk, and I agree with everything that you're saying. I have one little caveat. I'm always suspicious of using language that is not direct. And one of the not direct expressions I particularly don't like is passed away. Because it kind of goes against the truth of death. It's almost like a fear of saying dying to say passed away. So you used both terms, and I just wanted to give that objection. It's not necessarily a humanist objection, but it's a language objection. It's just another thing that keeps us from looking directly at what death is and ending. Passed away, to me, almost is like a religious kind of thing. You can picture the angels kind of carrying you, or there's some other place you're passed away to. So I just wanted to throw that at you.
Thank you. And language does absolutely matter. So I personally prefer the term aid and dying to death with dignity, because again, however you view a dignified death, that's really that comes down to you. So aid and dying is the term that I personally prefer. The language does matter. And so, for example, I've heard people refer to this type of medication, this practice, as assisted suicide. And so just to clarify on what that would actually mean. The reason why I view that to be, it is an inaccurate term, is one, that it's not assisted. Someone has to self-administer medication. And if you can't take it yourself, you don't qualify for it. And in terms of the term suicide, when we think of suicide, we think of someone that has a full life ahead of them that they're choosing to forego because they don't want to live anymore. It's someone that has the option to live, but decides not to. This is exclusively for people that would prefer to live but no longer have the option to do so. For example, in the case of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11, there are people that were jumping out of the building to avoid what was going on inside the building. And they're just a little homicide. No, people were not saying, people are committing suicide. It was people that did not have an option to live anymore, and were taking the action that they felt was going to prevent them from suffering unduly. And so in that sense, that's why I personally feel that suicide does not describe the rational end-of-life decision these people are making. And so that's why you're right, language does matter. And personally, again, I prefer the term to say that someone died. It's just more accurate. And then also in case of what someone is taking, I do feel that aid in dying is the most accurate term. So thank you.
Hi, I was the executor and health director person for my cousin a couple of years ago, and she got desperately ill, and the doctors first tried everything, and then they did say, she went into pretty much a coma. So then the doctors, the hospital, the lawyers, and everyone came in. She did not administer it herself, the hospital did, under my direction. And she had signed everything, and so did I, way prior to this. Is that considered not self-medicated? Or, in other words, not given it herself? She was in a coma.
That would not qualify as self-administered. So when it says that you have to be mentally competent to take this medication yourself, part of that means you have to be conscious. You have to be able to say, okay, I'm taking this now, and then take it. And that's, again, the point of that is to prevent the possibility of abuse or neglect, and to make sure, again, it's not to say that people that are in comas don't deserve this option. It's to say that to make sure that this is legally available, we have to make sure the only people taking this are those that are fully aware of what they are doing. Again, it just comes down to personal choice. So.
One back here, and then Eric, anyone else?
I'm not sure I understand the need for the law. Could you go into more depth about what impediments this would remove under the current system?
Well, the idea behind this law is that if someone wanted to end their own life, given that they have a terminal diagnosis, and if they also meet the other criteria, then they would be able to do it out in the open. They'd be able to do it with family members around. There'd be a process for them, to take medications. They have to go through certain safeguards. They would have to meet certain criteria, and also to make sure that family members are not unduly charged, because that's been an issue in a number of cases where someone was terminally ill and a family member either handed them, and this is in states where it's not legal, where a family member would hand them a medication, or they would somehow assist in some minor way, and they would be charged with manslaughter. So this is also to protect the family as well. So there are a couple of different reasons why I personally feel that this would create an envelope of safety almost for people that feel that there's a need for this. But ultimately it comes down to making sure that people that want this don't have to go to extreme lengths to get it and put themselves or family members at harm. So that's my opinion.
I have two things that I wanted to ask. One was, just to clarify, this law doesn't create any new restrictions on the end-of-life choice.
No.
It opens a specific avenue, but it doesn't change, like if somebody has been able to legally do something, like Elaine was saying, it's not precluding that.
Right.
It's adding an option,
yes,
to some that already exist.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. The other sort of angle I have with this, I understand that there's a lot of political opposition, and I get the sense that the law is crafted as much to overcome as much opposition as is necessary, and no more, in order to get it passed, rather than being a first, from first principles ethical legislation in order to maximize people's individual freedom. Would you agree that that's what the movement has sort of been forced into in some sense? I guess what I'm saying is I imagine there are many people behind this law who would like a more permissive system or law, but have settled on this as the first step or as the best option that they can get through the New Jersey State Legislature.
I don't look at this as a chain. I don't see a ladder here. I personally don't support anything beyond this specific piece of legislation. And that's because this is set up in such a way to make sure, again, that there's no possibility of abuse or neglect, or that it's minimal, and to make sure that the only people taking this are those that are immensely confident of the fact that they're doing so, and are physically able to do it themselves. The first aid and dying law was passed in Oregon close to 20 years ago, in a very similar manner to this bill in New Jersey. So I can't say that there has been public pressure or pressure from other opposing political parties to say change the movement, when it has in fact been this case for close to 2 decades now. And yes, it does focus on maximizing personal freedoms, on making sure that people can decide what they think is best for themselves. And I think that's sort of been almost the mantra for a while now. It's really not saying this is what you should do, because I personally have no stance. I think you should do whatever you so choose with your end-of-life care, because again, it's yours. So it's not to say that this is the best option for you, and it's not to say that this is what you should do. It's to say you should have a lot of options, and we think this is one of them, but you already have the rest, and so we're going to focus on consulting you on the rest, and so you can educate yourself, and that's what we have our end-of-life consultation program for. And then for the one that you don't have yet, well, let's make sure you have that option in case you want it. That's what it ultimately comes down to for me.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
I'm wondering if you've had any experience with groups like this lobbying to, say, directly to the governor with a resolution that the Red Bank Humanists believe this, that, and the other thing, as opposed to signing a petition individually. Have there been other groups, and would that be the way to go? Or?
Yeah, we're always happy to have resolutions passed in support of bills. Even stances of neutrality are good, because it's essentially saying, we don't have a stance on this, or rather we are choosing not to take a side. We're open to it. Yes, we've had a number of groups that have come out in support of this, including the New Jersey Psychological Association, including a number of nurses and medical student organizations. Doctors, I'd say more than 50% of doctors are in support of this option. Even the medical societies themselves take a stance against it. Essentially, the stand, for example, the Medical Society of New Jersey is opposed to this bill because they view this as part of medical care, and therefore they can't take a stance in support of something when they have a significant number of doctors opposed to it. But I would say that more than 50% of doctors do support this option. And yes, a number of groups have come out and endorsed it. If you want, if you give me your information, I can send you a link on all the different groups that have endorsed aid and dying in New Jersey. Most recently, actually, the California Medical Association came to a neutral stance for aid and dying in their state, saying essentially, this is a personal thing between you and your doctor, and we can't take sides for it.
Would that be to the governor, or is that the best?
It wouldn't be to the governor, as in this is our resolution to Governor Christie. It would merely just be saying we support this, and then we can tell Governor Christie or other senators or other assembly members, look, this is how this group feels on the issue. But yes, I mean everything helps. Everything helps.
Thank you for your talk. Bob posted a great article. I'll let you speak to that maybe. I don't know, the article about doctors dying at home. I don't know if you want to make that point, but I appreciated that. But in the same way that family members may be protected from being charged with manslaughter, some insurance companies are no military benefits or sometimes not paid out if it's considered suicide. So this legislation might protect those things.
That's correct. So if you were to take this medication, that would not be qualified as suicide by any insurance company. So people that have taken this medication in states where it's legal have had no trouble with receiving life insurance. Because keep in mind, they're terminally ill. And then this is also seen as a medical option that involves your doctor writing a prescription for you and going through numerous medical safeguards. And then also, in terms of what insurance companies feel about this option, insurance companies have not weighed in at all. There hasn't been a single statement by any insurance company saying we want this or we don't want this. I think in large part because most people are not taking this option in states where it's legal. Oregon has a population of 3.5 million people, and they had 94 take it last year. And that's in a state where it's been legal and known to be legal for close to 20 years. So I don't think this has a large impact on them.
Since New Jersey doesn't have the benefit of this law, what are the most practical options for the person who is terminal? I can think of hospice. I can think of, for example, having enough pain medication so that at least they don't suffer with great pain. But are there any other options?
Right. Well, there are a number of options, yes. There are living wills, there are advanced directives, there are post orders. I'm personally not an expert on end-of-life choice options, and I also don't know your background personally. I would recommend checking out our website or calling one of our end-of-life consultants. They don't give advice on saying this is what you should do. They essentially say, well, this is what each thing would do. What do you want? And it's really the main effort is on educating, not persuading people to do any one thing. So I mean, we have magazines at the back with Scott Adams, the author of Dilbert, on it for what that's worth. And so you can check that out. And there's a lot of information on advanced directives and things like that in there. So check that out.
It's a great talk. Thank you. 2 questions. One is, how far off do you think we are to having a federal law allowing this? Like that Canada just, their Supreme Court just made it legal early this year. Are we like years away from that, decades away from that? And the other question is, let's say someone finds out they have Alzheimer's and they decide they want to, let's say, end their life as things start to get bad. How hard would it be for them to get pentobarbital on their own? Or would it be extremely difficult?
I think it'd be quite difficult. I mean, frankly, I've met doctors that have done this to patients, and they've said, and remember, don't take this amount of morphine. So chances are, the people that are well off would still have access to this sort of thing, even if even dying wasn't legal in their state. So this is in part to make sure that people that are disenfranchised, that don't have those sort of connections, to make sure they have this option as well. I personally, I mean, you can't just get pentobarbital like you can just get OxyContin, for example. It's quite difficult. So I think it would be tough. But in terms of the Supreme Court, that would come down to the Supreme Court, I guess. I mean, I find it unlikely that there would be a ruling stating federal legality for even dying. I know they recently came out and support same-sex marriage, and I mean, we didn't see that coming. I can't say, I sort of had this idea that same-sex marriage is going to work in the way that there would be more and more states legalizing it on an individualized basis, but for example, Alabama was not going to have legalized same-sex marriage anytime in the near future. And now you can get married to a member of the same sex in Alabama. So that's hard for me to say. I find it unlikely, but we've been proven wrong before. So.
I've got some reservations about the arbitrary figure of 6 months that's given as impending death. And my reservations revolve around the issue of diagnosis. We all know that giving somebody a prognosis is a tricky thing at best. And there are many examples where it's been wrong. And the problem at issue here to me is one doctor may feel somebody has 7 months to live, but that doesn't qualify them for the program. If he had said 6 months, then yes, they're in. And that's a little bit problematical. There are those who have been over-enthusiastic in giving a negative prognosis, as for example, this poor woman who was in ICU was, I guess, implied or told that she was terminal, and she doesn't look terminal to me. Exactly. And I have my own cases that I've grossly misdiagnosed prognosis. I had a patient with a glioblastoma, the highly malignant brain tumor, and at that time, it's different today because there are a lot of new drugs on the market, but at that time, the general accepted prognosis for glioblastoma was 6 months. And I had to tell him that and to tell his family that. The fact of the matter is that he had several things going for him. One was the location of the tumor that permitted a second resection of it. And maybe just youth and good luck. He survived 2.5 years and in good shape. He was a boat captain in Hawaii. He used to run tours. And he looked the part. He looked like a surfer. And he went back to that again, even after the second operation, although he didn't last that long. And by the third time, he was beyond real help. But this was a gross misexaggeration based on the accepted statistics about that tumor. I was way off base happily, but nevertheless, it just shows you the variability. So when you arbitrarily are picking a 6-month guess as to how long somebody's going to live, it seems to be a weakness in the system. Now, in general, I'm in favor of your bill, but I think it's going to need some tweaking. And I'm wondering, with the experience that Oregon has had, whether they have come across any ways of taking account of the fact that the 6 months is not necessarily the best arbitrary dates to set for terminal.
Right, so first off, 6 months is not an arbitrary date. That's the same requirement for hospice. So that is not something that Compassionate Choices or any specific legislator came up with. So that's set by hospice in their kind of care requirements. And in terms of people taking this medication when they are not in fact terminally ill or when they have longer than 6 months to live, well, there are a couple of things I can say to that. First of all, you have to have 2 or more doctors give you a diagnosis of less than 6 months to live. So that reduces the likelihood that there would be an incorrect diagnosis. However, it does happen from time to time. And what we have to remember is that the average amount of time between someone receiving this medication and taking it in states where it's legal is 45 days. So on average, people don't receive a terminal diagnosis and then immediately take the medication. People don't take the medication until they're actively dying and they actually find that there's no other option left for them. Because 1/3 of the people that receive it don't even end up taking the medication. This is not something people are jumping at. And in truth, there's a difference between the doctor saying you might die in 6 months and you actually die and saying you have less than a week. So there are differences there. But again, ultimately it comes down to the patient's choice. And I think that if we want to have compassion and respect for those other people, we have to allow them to make those decisions for themselves, especially given the number of safeguards that we have to make sure that the only people taking this medication are those that are terminally ill with less than 6 months to live.
Just want to add one more thing, and that's the Alzheimer's situation. The big problem here, of course, is when you decide somebody is less than 6 months to live with Alzheimer's, they're not capable of taking the medication, as you said. Now, there are efforts to make more prognostic assessments of patients who have Alzheimer's. There's an article just published in the New England Journal, for example, who listed what the symptoms were as you gradually deteriorated. And they're able to some extent to predict, depending on what symptoms you're developing, how long you have to live. It's almost like a table. It's not a firm predictive basis. It just shows how important the issue of prediction is. And there's also the big gap that what do you do about the Alzheimer's patients? We know that Alzheimer's is a fatal disease. We know based on these symptoms, to the extent that they're true, that you get to a certain point, you can almost predict how many months they have to live, but you can't do anything about it at that point. One changed example is somebody who can say, during one day on the average, he does 6 comprehensible words. And then the next stage down is during the average day, that person says only 1 comprehensible word. Right. That's a deterioration. And there are a whole list of those. And based on that, you can estimate roughly the life expectancy. But you're trapped at that point because they can't take it.
They wouldn't be mentally competent. Right. I mean, again, that's the whole point of this bill, is to make sure the only people that can take it are those that are mentally competent and physically able to do so. So it's not to say that people that have Alzheimer's, again, they shouldn't be able to take the medication. It's that we need to set certain safeguards in place to make sure people aren't abused under this law.
I understand this as far as it goes. My problem is it doesn't go far enough. You exclude this whole people with severe dementia and certain other conditions that you know damn well are going to be dead within X months. But you can't include them in your program. Is there anything in sight to be able to accommodate them?
Again, I don't see any, because, I mean, the reason we need to make sure that the only people that are taking this are those that really want to take it, those that are fully aware of what they're doing, that have their mental faculties in place. And I can't speak to the future, and I can't say that this is a step in a certain direction, because in Oregon's law has been the case for 18 years and they haven't changed that. So I don't see any on the horizon. I'm not saying it's impossible. But my personal stance is that we need to, really the utmost priority in passing a law like this is to make sure that people aren't abused under it, to make sure that people only take it when they know that they want to take it. I think that's the most important thing.
So you mentioned earlier in your talk that a couple of states, I think New Mexico was one of them, had a similar legal climate achieved by a court decision. and yet that was only applicable in that particular district or circuit.
Right.
This is a federal court decision or state?
For New Jersey legislation?
No. Where it became...
No, New Mexico Supreme Court.
Oh, okay, so a state, okay.
Yeah.
Is there prospect for that to surface at the national level and therefore affect other states? Or does it look like, oh, that's sort of the end of the line because of a state court decision?
Right, I mean, again, I find it unlikely. I mean, honestly, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't personally know. I haven't heard anything from anyone else at Compassion Choices that finds that a possibility down the road. I think that if that were to be the case, the closest thing I've heard that would be possible was actually a doctor who belongs to the Medical Society told me, he suggested to me the idea that they could have a situation set up for which your doctor would simply give you a terminal diagnosis, and then you would, go to the psychiatrist, and then you would get the medication yourself. Like you would write your own script. That way, the doctors aren't directly involved in it. So maybe that would make it more likely, because then it's really making it more about personal choice. I don't think that's going to materialize, because I think the doctors are there for a reason. But ultimately, I find it unlikely, but it's possible. And frankly, the reason why there is a need for this, in my opinion, is because there is a limit to medical technology, and maybe we'll get to a place where there is a way to cure someone of all pain, but we're not there right now. And frankly, and I should have touched on this earlier, of the 3 reasons people cited for taking this medication to say it's where it's legal, the 3 reasons were loss of dignity, loss of autonomy, and loss of ability to participate in activities that made life pleasurable. So pain was not actually in the top 3. And the truth is, if you are someone who is in a state in which you feel that you don't have dignity, or you feel that you don't want to live without autonomy, and you're also terminally ill, I think there's no amount of morphine, for example, can give any of those things back to you. But again, that's why I think this is a highly individualized issue. This is not one size fits all. When they talk about end-of-life choices, I think there should be, your end-of-life choices. That should be the name of the focus. Because again, for most people, this won't be a necessary option. But for those occasional people that have a type of disease like pancreatic cancer, then I think it might be more applicable to them if they so choose. But just cancer is number 1. Cancer is about a little over 70%. ALS was around 16%. And then the remaining, 14%, was a mix of other diseases. So.
Some people consider fetuses to be legal persons. Is there anything in the bill specifically restricting people who are pregnant from using it?
I haven't heard of that. Again, someone would have to be 18 or older to take this medication. I haven't seen anything in the bill that says you can't be pregnant if you want to take this. Actually, that's a good question. I haven't heard that before. But no, I mean, the average age of someone taking this medication is 72. So chances, for example, we all heard of Brittany Menard, who was a 29-year-old woman who was living out in California. She was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and then she moved to Oregon, qualified for the medication, and then decided to start advocating for the cause. Brittany was an anomaly, and it's highly unlikely that anyone that would be able to become pregnant would then take this medication. The vast majority of people take this medication that goes in their 70s with insurance, generally college educated. There's a very specific group, and yet it is more people are starting to understand their own personal need for it. So.
Well, thank you very much. So that was great. We had a very extensive question and answer, and I think we got everybody in. I just want to thank everyone for coming today, and hope you enjoyed the discussion. I found it very informative, and I hope you did as well. If you'd like to continue on this topic, or you can start your own topic and get something to eat, many of us will be headed to Jani's Pizzeria for lunch. There's details about the exact location, as well as even a little map in the program, and you're welcome to join us. So again, thanks, and have a wonderful day.